Super Potato is one of the most famous places to buy retro video games in Japan. But does it deserve this reputation? And what are the prices that you will pay for the games that you find? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Living Room Studio. I am your man out of Japan, Jay Contra, and today we're going to be talking about the big one, Super Potato. Now, like the video that I made about Hard Off, and hopefully we'll make into a series, I want to talk about Super Potato as a store. So we're going to talk about what it is, where you can find Super Potato, the kinds of games and systems that you'll find there, pricing, and the overall sort of customer experience and my sort of overall recommendation of whether or not you should visit Super Potato. So to begin with, what is Super Potato? If you haven't heard, Super Potato is probably the biggest, most famous, well, actually not, it's actually quite a small store, but probably the most widely known place to look for retro video games in Japan, particularly in the Tokyo area. There is actually a couple in Tokyo, the most famous being the Akihabara location, so famous that actually it is recreated in Persona 5 as the place where you can go to buy retro video games to play to improve your stats back home. There's also one near Ikebukuro Station on the same train line. I believe, though, that Super Potato started out as just a regular video game store in the Osaka area. There's actually, I think, there's 7 shops in the Osaka area, and there's also one in Nagoya. But the ones that I'm going to particularly talk about in this video are the retro shops, because Super Potato is mostly actually like a regular video game retailer, like new and used stuff in the Osaka area. But the two that I think are most famous outside of Japan, and the ones that you'll probably find when you're searching for it online, are the Akihabara location, which deals exclusively in retro games, as well as the RetroCon, or the retro store, in the Osaka Nipponbashi area. And to access these places, you just get on the train. You get on the subway. They're right in the middle of like gigantic cities. Most of these Super Potatoes actually are very easy to get to. So unlike Hard Off, which is sort of spread all across the country, these are in city centers and easily accessible, like 5-minute walk away from many different train stations. So, aside from accessibility, what kind of games are you going to find let's just talk about the Akihabara location instead of confusing this. When you walk into Super Potato, you are going to find games from basically the beginning of video games in Japan until I think the Xbox 360 era. I actually don't remember if they had any PS3 games, but they're by and large, they focus on the Famicom, Super Famicom, up until like Dreamcast, PS2 era. And they have all kinds of everything. They'll have your common games, they'll have your Super Mario Brothers, as well as like deep dives into the Neo Geo, 3DO, Neo Geo CD, Game Gear. They have everything. And that's its real advantage, is because it is this very specialist store, it has this reputation both among the foreign and the domestic collecting community as the place to go to trade in your games. So you're going to have a wide variety of games, and it's just really like the selection there it's very hard to compete with. I don't necessarily want to say it is the best selection in all of Japan, but it's definitely up there, if not being the best. In terms of the condition of the games that you'll find there, I would say that generally it's going to be above average because they are catering towards the specialist community. They really don't take in stuff that's like badly damaged, has any problems with it, or if they do, then they just put it into like the junk pile. I should mention that they do have a little junk area for both. It's like 2 floors. The thing about the Akihabara location that maybe I should have mentioned before is this is the first time this is the only place that I had heard of selling retro games in Japan when I first went. And when I went there and I found it on my phone, and I was like, whoa, what is this? Because it's just like this normal like building in the middle of Akihabara, and you have to walk through this like very dark hallway with no windows and go up like 2 flights of stairs, very narrow stairs to get to it. So it can actually be somewhat intimidating on the outside. But when you get on the inside, it sort of sets the standard, I think, it's the template for what you would expect from a video game shop in Japan, where it's like very, very narrow aisles, but just the shelves are stocked full with consoles and games. And those games, we're talking like, it probably has one of the better like PC Engine selections that I've seen outside of, say, a newly opened Surugaya. And the condition of these games is going to be quite good. Again, because they don't really take in like sort of anything that's been severely damaged. So not only would the average in Japan be quite high to a lot of foreigners who are visiting, but Super Potato, I think, even slightly more so than the competition. But that brings us to price. So Super Potato does price its games based on condition, meaning that the worse the condition of the game, the less expensive it is going to be. So the more mint the game is, the less damaged, the more pristine a copy of the game, the more expensive it is going to be. But I will say that on average, condition being equal compared to competitors, I believe that Super Potato is more expensive than the competition, and here's why. And I believe it's because of brand recognition. So the thing about Super Potato is it has had a legendary status since at least the late 2000s. I actually, for this video, I was looking up sort of what people thought about Super Potato, and I found an article calling it legendary in the year 2007. And since then, it's only become more well-known as more and more people go to Japan. I think a lot of this reputation comes from like sort of video game journalists going to Japan for Tokyo Game Show, for other events and press coverage, going to the shop in Akihabara that sells retro games, and then sort of bringing that legend to America, to Europe, to other places in the world. And since then, there's just been more Instagram pictures, more YouTube videos popularizing that shop. So it has this recognition that, like, and I said before that when I came to Japan for the first time, I heard about it from a friend. I was looking for old video games. It was the only place that I had heard of, so it was the first place that I went to. So I have actually not bought that many games from Super Potato because it does have high prices. And I can tell you on the games that you would expect foreigners to be looking for example, say like Mother 2, Earthbound, it has, bar none, I think, the highest price on Earthbound and Earthbound-related games that I've ever seen at any shop in Akihabara or in Japan in general. And that's because it knows that that's what the foreigners are looking for when they come to Super Potato. It sort of even it's kind of infamous, Super Potato is, for being like you only see foreigners in there. And that's not exactly true. You do see some Japanese people in there. But I think most serious Japanese collectors know that they're going to get better deals at other shops, which is why you see so many more foreigners than you would, brand reputation aside, in the particular shop, both in Osaka and in Tokyo. But Tokyo specifically, I think, because you've got more visitors there. But what is a situation where you would want to buy a game from Super Potato? Well, I think it's really if you've looked around at other shops. I always recommend, even the shops that I do recommend you buy games from, always look around at the competition, see if you might be able to find that game elsewhere, because Super Potato for a while actually had some of the best prices on Sega Saturn games, like weirdly enough, versus everyone else. Like Radiant, it was the cheapest place you could buy Radiant Silvergun, for example, to give a weird example. Its selection is really incomparable, particularly when it comes to rare systems. I'm talking things like Wonder Megas, that's sort of the Mega Drive that incorporates the CD unit. I'm talking about like front-loading Neo Geo CDs, just like lots of other systems that you just don't find other places. And it does have like some cheap prices on games. You've just gotta, the thing is if you're watching this video and you're getting new into collecting Japanese games, you don't know much about collecting games, you don't know much about prices, I would really caution you against buying games from Super Potato in general, just because in general, you're going to find better prices elsewhere. But if you're a veteran in the hobby and you know what you're looking for, yeah, Super Potato might have what you're looking for at a price you were willing to spend for that particular item. So just keep that in mind. So I don't want to particularly badmouth Super Potato, because it has earned recently in the last 4 or 5 years a sort of infamous reputation for being way overpriced to the point where people just avoid it. I recommend that you go to Super Potato and you at least visit it, because the atmosphere is second to none. I said it before and I'll say it again. It essentially defined what people expect a Japanese retro game shop to look like, or really just retro game shops in general. Like I've heard of a shop near me that's called Super Tomato. I know I've heard of a place in Seattle called Pink Gorilla that has, like, the owner said that, yeah, they were basically just trying to copy what Super Potato was doing. I've seen other game shops in Japan essentially just try to copy Super Potato. Like there was one in the small town that I used to live near that was, I don't want to say a carbon copy, but looked really close to what Super Potato was doing like 20 years ago. Retro Game Camp, just down the street from Super Potato, is essentially trying to copy that aesthetic. They've got old strategy guides. They've got the accessories. They've got the more modern, the modern merchandise to sort of evoke that nostalgia. The only problem is when you look at the showcase and you see like super expensive copies of like Castlevania Aria of Sorrow. That's like almost twice as expensive as what you'll find at other shops when you're looking at things for the Game Boy Advance, for the GameCube, that are really, really expensive. It's sort of those rare items that it knows what it has and it will charge accordingly, because there are some collectors who will pay that price. But if you are in Tokyo, if you haven't been before, or if it's been a while since you've been to Super Potato, I would say just go, soak in the atmosphere, see what it's like to be in what is, I would say even today, what is the Japanese video game or the Japanese retro store. Because Super Potato defined it, and I think still continues to define it, to the point where they have stuff in their showcases that's just not even for sale. Like it's this super rare stuff that is just like, here, we want to put this on display. No, we're not going to sell it to you, although I wonder if you approach them with a very high figure, maybe they might sell it to you. I don't know how that works. But they've got even stuff like they've got like Atari 2600 games, which I don't think were even officially released in Japan until like after the crash. They have those that you just don't see literally anywhere else. It's an incredible store. And I don't think I have anything else to add. When I think about the stuff that I have purchased at Super Potato, really only 2 things. Just getting into my personal experience with it, I've been going to that shop for 8 years now. And I remember when I went to the location in Osaka, I picked up a copy of, I think, Pokemon Red and or Green, back before the Pokemon bubble hit. And it was actually like way more expensive than I ended up finding it at other shops. And that was like back in like 2013, 2014. Even back then, it was relatively overpriced compared to the competition. But then there was an N64 wrestling game that I had a hell of a time finding at other shops, but Super Potato had it. And I actually think it ended up being cheaper than when I eventually found it, but I can't remember specifically. Other than that, I have not spent that. I did buy my copy of Battle Garega. That was it was a decent price at the time, although it ended up going down in price. So yeah, I've bought stuff from Super Potato. I'm not telling you that you shouldn't buy stuff from Super Potato, because I don't want Super Potato to go out of business. I believe Super Potato has a place within the Japanese retro game collecting scene, whatever that means. But again, just caution against buying the regular stuff of Super Potato. They do take good care of their stuff. Contrasting, I think hard off from the previous video, contrast it with Super Potato, they are on opposite ends of the collecting spectrum. You have Hard Off, which doesn't really give a crap about the games it takes in. It just wants rapid turnover. It just wants people bringing in stuff and then it's selling out. Whereas Super Potato, I think it was when I bought those Pokemon games, when I purchased them, they actually came with little bottles of rubbing alcohol and Q-tips so that you can clean out the games. Now, on the one hand, you would think that they should have cleaned out the games themselves, which they probably do. I bet they do. But it's also because this is how you take care of your games. They want to take care of your game. They want you to take care of the games. They also will have their games protected in UV filtering plastic so that they don't degrade over time, as I've seen in many other even specialist shops. Even at certain even at a couple of places that you would expect would take care of their games, they don't take care of them quite on the level of Super Potato. The location in Akihabara has 3 floors, 2 of which are just selling games, and 1 is just a retro arcade. Just go and search for Super Potato in images on Google or on Instagram. You will see it is just so cool, and really no other shop, even my favorites like Trader, Mandarake, they just don't have that atmosphere of a place that is just solely dedicated to retro games. There are a couple of places that try to imitate it like Retro Camp, but nothing, I think, quite reaches the level of Super Potato. So it has unrivaled brand recognition and brand power, but it uses that to charge a premium and, frankly, I think takes advantage of tourists and people who are new to collecting Japanese video games that I think that should know better about what they're buying from Super Potato. I guess maybe to end it on a slightly weird note, there was about 5 years ago, about in 2015, 2016, there was a short, maybe about a year or two long period where people were lamenting the fact that Super Potato was getting cleared out. You would walk in, you would see just empty store shelves. That was back when I think collecting retro games was at its peak anyways, but it just seemed like people knew about Super Potato. They came in, and I think particularly for the PC Engine, they just came in and they cleared out the shelves. So I think that also added to its infamy because it raised prices in order to have video games on the shelves in order to sell them because it's a business and it needs to make money. But also, it started filling in those gaps with merchandise. Maybe 15 years ago, if you went to Super Potato in Akihabara or to the one in Osaka whenever it opened up, to the RetroCon, it would just be wall-to-wall retro games with some merchandise. But now, I think even in the year 2020 and beyond, I bet you anything that it's just going to become even more merchandise, more stuffed animals, more sort of modern printings of old games, since they're doing that now for the Super Famicom, more reproduction systems. But contrast that with the fact that it's one of the few places that will actually take in Famicom disk systems and replace the drive belts themselves and sell it for what is actually not a terrible price. It takes care of its systems. And while I think it is a bit disappointing that they will sell systems just with the controller and not with the AV equipment, if you've only got a certain amount of time and you're visiting Akihabara, I would definitely put Super Potato near the top of the list of places to visit at the expense of a few other places. So on that note, I'm going to end the video here before I can continue rambling. I hope I've at least explained about what Super Potato is and I think what it means to Japanese video game collecting, because there is no other shop like it. If you have any questions about Super Potato or about collecting Japanese games in general, please leave a comment on this video. I'm always looking for feedback and for knowledge that people want about collecting. I have been your man out of Japan, Jay Contra, saying thanks for watching, see you next time, and mahalo.